She's arguably one of the most mystical and controversial women in the history. She introduced this new movement that some even refer to as religion that actually denies Christian God. Her ideas inspired Hitler to create this theory of Aryans and also to use the symbol of swastika. And despite all of this, influential and intellectual people like Mahatma Gandhi and Einstein really wholeheartedly were inspired by her. There is actually no in between when it comes to the opinion about this woman. You either admire her or you call her a fraud. Who is this mysterious woman and how her ideas changed the world? Jelena Blavatsky, in English sometimes referred to as Helena Blavatsky or Madame Blavatsky, she was indeed a phenomenon of the 19th century. She was a medium and also a prophet. Allegedly, she could hear the thoughts of people and animals around her. Different objects would move without physically touching them, and she claimed that she was actually enlightened. This video will be so interesting. In fact, I'm not even sure if it's going to be one or two videos because there's so much about her, but I wanted to make clear about this one thing, that I will not be judging and telling that I believe or not. I'm just going to simply retell the biographical facts that we know about her and just look at it from the perspective of how controversial it is. I'm not discussing her books, her beliefs and stuff like that. I'm going to leave that to you. But still, just stick with me. Even if we're looking at her biography, it's so interesting. So let's just get onto it. Jelena was coming from an aristocratic clan with the name of Han von Rothenstern. She was born in the year 1831, August 12th, in a place called Yekaterinoslav, located in the eastern part of Ukraine. She was of Russian, German, and French ancestry, and her father Pyotr was actually an honorable colonel in Russian army, which meant that he would move around quite frequently, also together with the family. And it's alleged that father actually was the one who inspired Jelena to travel around so much in her further life. Since she was a child, she was like this a little bit scary kid, if you can put it like that. In her presence, it was alleged that some objects would move around. During the night, she would walk around and talk to some ghosts and spirits. So people were a little bit scared of her, if I can put it like that. Furthermore, it is said that she would scare her relatives with her prophecies because she could exactly tell at which point a certain relative would die. And the family and the relatives would actually say that it's not a gift that she's having, but it's basically that she's possessed by a devil. There is this story, I'm not sure if it really happened, but that's one of the stories. And mind you, there will be a lot of legends around Jelena. So when she was a little girl, one of her nannies told her a story about people who are born on Sundays, that these people usually are able to speak with ghosts. And little Jelena, being very impressionable and she had a really wild imagination, she kind of caught this idea and was like, okay, yes, I'm born on Sunday, so I should probably also be able to speak to ghosts. And it is said that from that moment, she started to walk around the house and allegedly talk to ghosts. That is just one of the stories that is told by the people who do not believe that Jelena actually had these skills to speak with ghosts since her childhood. But if we look from another perspective, she also had a lot of tragedies in her life, and maybe her imagination was kind of like a coping mechanism. And this is from where all of these stories about ghost spirits are actually coming. But as I said, we never know what was in reality happening there. But one is for sure that one of the first tragedies that she experienced was that when she was 2 years old, she had a brother who died just because the medical help couldn't arrive in time. So that could be probably the first childhood trauma for her. But as I said, everybody was kind of a little bit like scared around her because of how she was talking and what she was saying and doing. And she would constantly have nannies changing because they couldn't keep up with her. And she was also very intellectual, let's say too smart for her age, as if now I guess you call those people as having old souls. Now, with her growing up, the ghost stories and the weird events would escalate, as if she would become more stronger and stronger with it. The only person who allegedly had like a real connection to her was her mother, and she would be the one who could wake up during the night and go to her while she was walking around the house, calm her down, hug, bring her back to her bedroom. So she had a real connection with her mother. And maybe she was also a little bit inspired by her mother because she also was a very intelligent lady. She was actually developing her own literary career. She was working on translating different novelists' books from English into Russian. By the end of the 1830s, her father was made the trustee for Kalmyk people of Central Asia. For your information, they are Mongolian ethnic group. So the family and Jelena moved to Astrakhan and befriended the leader of Kalmyk people. Now, the thing that you have to know is that Kalmyks were practicing Tibetan Buddhism, and it is believed that this is the first moment when Jelena Blavatsky actually encountered Tibetan Buddhism and was kind of getting familiar to the idea of Buddhism. But as I said, her father, he was a military, so they would keep moving around, and in the 1840, they were moving away from there again. And Jelena even welcomed in her family a new brother. Some might say that her imagination with the ghosts and spirits and the skills that she was kind of developing were like a coping mechanism because her life actually lacked stability. They were moving around a lot. And then she had all of these like siblings and things happening around, always introducing new people, new faces. You had to get used to new locations, new teachers, new nannies. So maybe this was her coping mechanism, but I don't know. Maybe it was for real. Whether it was really a fruit of her imagination or reality, she had an ally besides her. So her mother, as I said, they had a real connection and she was always there to support her. However, when she was only 19, her mother tragically passed away from tuberculosis. So at this point, little Jelena, she was now alone, and there was nobody actually who was supporting her in her mental struggles. Now, one of the materials that I read said that before dying, Jelena's mother would say that maybe it's for good that she's dying, and she do not have to see the struggles of her daughter. Because she feels like Jelena will not live a normal woman's life. And actually, I guess she was right because Elena's life in future turned out to be a lot harder and filled with a lot of difficulties. But then again, as you will see, and we move on with the story, you will see how there are a lot of controversies. So we don't know what really happened, although there are some stories, okay? So after the mother's death, father understood that he will not be able to take care of his children because he's busy with work, and he decides to send all of the children, Jelena and all the siblings, to a maternal grandparents' house in Saratov, where grandfather Andrei was actually a governor. Time passed, and while she was living there with the grandparents, it seemed like everyone had accepted that she was this crazy wild child who had this imagination and stories about ghosts and spirits. And it was also said that, as I said, Jelena was kind of from aristocracy and she was supposed to communicate with children alike, but she would really like love to communicate and play with like lower class children. Jelena would enjoy playing out different pranks and laugh a lot. And one of her greatest passions was reading, and she really did it a lot. She received the best education like French, arts, music, with a plan to make her the best wife for someone in future. In summers, she would attend summer camps in Kalmyk, where she would also pick up horse riding and learn Tibetan or Lhasa Tibetan. This will be useful in future. Most of the stories about Madame Blavatsky actually tell that she kind of suddenly developed these skills of communicating with spirits and ghosts, and that she also developed some magic skills and like was really drawn to this esoteric world. However, there might be also a little bit of let's say logic explanation to this that contributed to developing these skills. Some sources mention that in her grandparents' house during that time when she was living there, she would discover a library of her Prince Pavel Vasilievich Dolgorukov, which contained a good amount of esoteric books. This spiked her interest, and she wanted to learn more about these topics. Just a little side note, which could give you an idea about how impressive the library could have been. Prince Dolgorukov was initiated in Freemasonry and was rumored to have met two very interesting characters face to face. One of them being Alessandro Cagliostro and the other Count of Saint-Germain. Knowing all of this, you can kind of conclude that probably reading these kind of esoteric books could make her imagination run wilder, or she could start practicing something that could develop these esoteric skills in her. Either way, I don't know what actually happened, and I'm leaving it up to you. I'm just telling you the facts that I have read in some sources. Anyways, let's talk more about those ghosts and spirits. One of those ghosts that she would quite frequently describe was this tall Indian man wearing all white. So this ghost would quite frequently visit her, and she would say that once he would appear, she would feel this like sense of calming down and being very, very safe. Grandparents really believe that with her becoming older, all of her imaginary friends, including this tall Indian man or guardian angel, as Jelena would put it, she would like forget about them, but they were so wrong because they were still there, and whether influenced by reading of these esoteric books or not, they would never leave her. In fact, Jelena would start questioning these skills. She was like, why do I have them? What is the purpose of me having them? So she would start to think about putting them somewhere where it would serve some kind of purpose. Now, Jelena was now coming out of age, which meant that she would have to go out in the society, meet some young men, and probably was destined just to find a husband and kind of find a household where she could be the lady of the house. But remember, Jelena, she was totally different. She really didn't want to go to a debutante ball. If you know what it means, you have to ritually go and present yourself to the society as possible wife of somebody. She would refuse to wear the dress that her grandmother bought to her, and her grandfather really had to force her to wear that dress and kind of prepare her for this debutante ball. And Jelena actually made a plan how to not attend this debutante ball. So this is again a alleged story, so I'm just gonna tell you. So the morning of the debutante ball comes, the relatives are knocking on the doors of her room, but she doesn't open. She says that she cannot go out. When they enter the room, they are totally shocked by what Jelena did. So what they saw in front of her was that Jelena had managed to pour a boiling water on her thighs, just so that she doesn't have to go to the ball. And of course she won, because she had terrible boils on her legs and she had to stay in bed for the following 6 months. But she won. Why did she do something like that to herself? Well, in fact, in many sources, it is said that she actually hated how she looked. So she hated to wear these dresses. She didn't like her own appearance. And I quote, "I do not have any femininity in me. If during my youth any young man would be brave enough to talk to me about love, I would shoot him as a dog who is trying to bite me." She wasn't interested in dressing up, freshening up for a potential life partner. What interested her was learning about the secrets of the world, making humans complete, and researching their hidden abilities. According to some accounts, later, around 1840s, she moved with her grandparents to Tbilisi, Georgia, where her grandfather was approved as a director of state lands in Transcaucasia. This might have been another influential time of her life, since Blavatsky claimed that there she would meet Alexander Vladimirovich Golitsyn, a Russian Freemason and a member of a very influential family who encouraged her interest in esoteric matters even deeper. This, coincidentally, is also the time when she started to have stronger and further paranormal experiences, astral traveling, and more meetings with her Indian-looking ghost. Now, fast forward, Jelena is now 16, some sources say 17, and her life changes completely, like upside down, because she got married. And this is another legend, another story, and I think you should listen to this. The story goes as follows. One day, young Jelena gets into a fight with one of her servants who really cannot bear her attitude, and she just screams at Jelena and says, like, nobody is going to marry you with that kind of attitude, not even that old crank Nikifor Blavatsky. So who is this man, Mr. Blavatsky? Well, the legend says that one day the house was visited by this highly ranked general, and that was Nikifor Blavatsky. Some sources say that he was around his 60s. Some sources say that he was in his 40s. Anyways, he was a lot older than Jelena, who was around her 16 or 17, okay? And it is said that after this argument with the servant, and that she said, like, oh, nobody's gonna marry you, not even this old crank that just visited us. Jelena got really stubborn and said, like, I will prove you that I can get somebody to marry me, and that somebody can even be Nikifor Blavatsky. Now, young Jelena goes into the room, meets this Mr. Blavatsky, sits in front of him and says, would you like to marry me? Of course, he was in a shock, this young girl offering to marry him. And after a little thought, he agrees. I mean, young girl, why not? Why not have this kind of beautiful wife? Later on, in some sources, Blavatsky would mention that she was interested in marrying him because he was also interested in esoteric, but there's no real proof of that. But this is the legend. This is the legend how Jelena allegedly proposed to her future husband. And this proposal was accepted. After this, Jelena kind of regretted it and wanted to tell the family, who were now greatly happy about this proposal, that this was simply a joke. It was because there was a bet and she wanted to prove that somebody would like to marry her, but nobody would buy her bullshit anymore. So they were so happy that they forbid to cancel this proposal, accepted proposal. So everybody was starting to prepare for the wedding. And Jelena was now in trouble. She really had to get married. First of all, everybody was so happy to get rid of this problematic child and give it to someone else to take care of. And secondly, like, Jelena was really fighting against this wedding, and she was like crying, making scenes, and out of desperation do a lot of activities. We know that she's capable, if the legend of the boiling water on the ties is real. But anyways, none of this worked, and she was getting dressed and about to get married. After the forced marriage, she moved to Yerevan to live at Sradar Palace and was, of course, asked by the husband to complete her wife's duty. You know what I mean by that, right? So just a reminder, she was in her 16 or 17 and he was 60 or 40. As we all know, she had mixed feelings about being close to a man. And if she was like 50-50 before, then now when she was forced to like fulfill her wife's duty, she really started to detest men. And it is said that this was like the first seed that later on developed into something that basically was a thing about her. She actually avoided any kind of physical contact with men, meaning she took the oath of celibacy. Now, soon again, her husband got the taste of what Jelena Blavatsky actually is. She would walk around during the nights in the yard, talking to ghosts, talking to spirits. A lot of strange things would happen in the house. And at the end, so just to make sure that she's safe, the husband would put some guards during the night so that they can make sure she doesn't wander somewhere in the woods and get lost or get injured. But one morning, when the husband wakes up, the servants and the guards come to him and say that Jelena has disappeared. I don't know, somehow she has managed to get away and nobody can find her. Actually, what happened is Jelena tried to return back to her family in Tbilisi, and she managed to do that. But the family didn't want to keep her because now she had a husband. So they decided to send her back, and accompanied by a maid servant, she was supposed to go on several ships to Odessa. However, Blavatskaya had a plan in her mind. Again, we don't know what really happened, but there's a whole legend about what happened next. Allegedly, she managed to escape these servants that were supposed to accompany her, and she landed on the ship that was going to Constantinople. Since she came from money, she had enough to bribe the crew on the ship so that they don't pay attention to her. And she would hide there and just go on to Constantinople. And from that moment, for the following 10 years, none of the family members would hear from her. And yes, she landed in Constantinople, but let's be honest, even though she came from the money, the things that happened next would require a lot of money. So she should have had like a huge bag with some cash or some kind of sponsor who was sending her the money. So that part is not really clear, and we don't know from where did she get the money to get all of these adventures that I'm about to tell you right now. Jelena later on described that once she landed in Constantinople, she felt so free, and she was ready to dive into the adventures and self-exploration. And at that point, she decided that her next destination point is going to be Egypt. To be honest, that is what we think happened, the things that I will describe further, because during these 9 to 10 years, Jelena Blavatsky didn't keep any kind of diaries or any kind of other documentation or notes where she would describe how she was going about these adventures. So all of the facts that I am telling about these 9-10 years when she disappeared from her family is actually from her own words. And sometimes they are kind of contradicting, okay? So keep that in mind. She traveled a lot. It is alleged that in Turkey, she would meet socialite Countess Sofia Kiselyova, whom she accompanied to Egypt, Greece, and Eastern Europe. Lots of questions here, of course, how someone just like that meets socialites. Blavatsky was also noble born, but if she would just approach people and tell that, yes, I'm from that clan, would mean that she's giving out her. And logically thinking, anyone could rat her out to the relatives looking for her. But okay, let's just leave it like that and let's assume this really happened. In Cairo, Blavatsky would meet Albert Rosen, who later wrote a lot about Middle East and became a member of Blavatsky's organization. They would visit places, and Blavatsky would meet people who, just like her, could talk to spirits. Long story short, she would go all around the world. She traveled to Australia, allegedly Asian countries, Europe, you just name it. And during these trips, she would meet interesting people, get inspired, and learn a lot of things. We will stop when she arrived arrives in London. Although she had traveled all around the world, she was still a little bit depressed and feeling heaviness in her heart because, okay, she met these people, she was inspired, and she was more confident in her skills, that there's something special about her, but she still didn't get the most important answer to the question, why her? Why does she have all of these skills? What to do with them? She was so disappointed. In fact, she was saying that she had some kind of existential crisis, and she would describe that this was a really dark time for her, and she decided that she's so confused about life that she would probably end up it here, and she was literally going to a bridge and about to jump from the bridge inside the river. So Ms. Blavatsky would write that she was literally looking into the dark waters of the river and thinking about how the world will not lose anything if she will not be here, and nobody will probably care. And on the moment when she was about just to jump off the bridge, somebody grabbed her hand and prevented her from doing that. She turned her head and couldn't believe her eyes. The man who saved her from jumping and who was now standing in front of her was this tall Indian man in the white clothes that was quite often appearing in front of her as this ghost who was calming her down. The only difference was that this time this wasn't a ghost. This was a real man with blood and flesh that was standing in front of her. And he appeared in the most crucial moment of her life when she was about to end things. So in her diary, Ms. Blavatsky about this incident wrote, August 12th is my birthday. I turned 20 on that day. I met the teacher from my dreams. The teacher felt like he should share the higher knowledge with me. During that time in London, there was a World's Fair happening, which would bring to London representatives from different British colonies. This Indian prince that was now in front of Miss Blavatsky came to London as a part of a Nepali delegation. Jelena did not even know his real name, but she would call him Master Morya, a.k.a. Master of Ancient Wisdom, Mahatma, or the Teacher. Why did he appear? Well, as he allegedly explained, he had chosen Jelena as a medium that would spread his message and knowledge. He promised that he would help her to tame her visions, and he would give her higher knowledge that would help her to gain power even over nature. But this Indian prince also said that there is a price to pay for that if she wants to involve in this kind of development of her life. First of all, she has to take the oath of celibacy, which is kind of understandable because like a lot of monks and religious practitioners often take these kind of oaths. However, there might be also another explanation, but we will get to that in future. And another thing is that she will have to emerge in this really deep studying process. And she was told that she might have to go to the society to spread the message about people as one brotherhood and other stuff. And although all of this information was given to her, like these outlines about what's supposed to happen, she was never given like a straight structure or like checklist, if you can say like that, of what she exactly have to do to spread this message. So I guess this is how this all led to the organization that she later on in her life founded. Once again, once she agreed to this offer, she had to travel again, and she found herself in India. But this time she was content because now she was there with a purpose. She was not walking around searching for something. She knew what was the reason she was there. There in India, she witnessed supernatural events and mystical rituals. She afterwards would tell about how Indians can do unbelievable things to their bodies and souls. They could sit in one pose for years and kill or submit an animal with just one look of the power of the mind. Later on, her path allegedly went back to England. Then in 1856, she allegedly managed to get into Tibet through Kashmir and then back to Europe again. There, after all the experiences from travel, she would claim her abilities would grow even stronger. It is that point when she decided to show her face again to her family and went to Pskov, where they were all located now. 1858, there was a knock on the door. The door opened, and there was Jelena again, in front of her family house. They didn't really recognize her because she had some bruises. She looked like very tired, but she had these shining and bright eyes full of energy. It is said that she continued to kind of scare her family again, because when she was walking around the house, like furniture was moving, there were some loud bangs heard on the wall, and there was no real explanation for that. Like, she was walking around very powerful, and people in the area started to speak about her as someone who has these kind of special abilities. And then, allegedly, this is another legend, something else happened that shocked everyone. So it is said that one day when they entered her room, because she wasn't like answering to the knocks of the door, they came in and they saw that she's lying in the bed and not moving, and basically she was dead. Like, there was no pulse, nothing. Another sources say, though, that she managed to fall off the horse and got like a back injury, and this is why she was in the bed. But let's just continue with this legend, because it sounds more interesting, to be honest. Back to the legend where they found her simply lying as if she was dead, unconscious in her bed. So it was said that the family called the doctors, and then when the doctor examined her, they saw that she has like this wound in her chest, that he couldn't stop the bleeding, so she fell into coma and was basically lying there in coma. And during the night, the servants would say that they would see her walking around in the garden in the house as if she was completely well, talking to something, which was totally opposite during the day when she was lying there in a total coma and couldn't even move a finger. One day, what a miracle, she simply wakes up as if nothing had happened. She was totally well, no injuries, nothing was hurting. She was energetic, as if she had woken up from a nice nap. And afterwards, when the relatives asked her questions, she would just say that she was basically into a deep trance. And during this trance, she said that she was directly connecting with her teacher. And if the family was doubting that she's a little bit cuckoo before, then now they were literally thinking that she is crazy. Also, during that time, it is said that she managed to reconcile with her husband, and they adopted a son whose name was Yuri, but unfortunately, he died at the age of 5. So again, she's into this loop, deaths of important people in her life, family not accepting her and her skills, and she felt like she has to escape again. Whether it was like influenced by a suggestion from her teacher to go away, whether it was because she couldn't just cope being there with her family and all of the grief, but she was gone again. It is alleged that she went to Italy, Transylvania, Serbia, allegedly studying Kabbalah with the rabbi, and so on. And at the end, she landed again in Constantinople, where she met her teacher in flesh again. From there, they would travel together to Tibet. According to Blavatsky, she would be able to stay in the home of one of the Mahatmas and also the teacher's colleague, Master Kut Humi. The Mahatmas helped her to tame her abilities and make them work in her favor. They would work on her sixth sense, telepathy, the ability to control another's consciousness, to dematerialize or rematerialize physical objects, and to project their astral bodies, thus giving the appearance of being in two places at once. According to Madame Blavatsky, she stayed there with these Mahatmas into this deep training from the year 1868 up to the year 1870. So, like, there's no reason not to believe that this didn't happen, although some historians argue because Tibet during that time, during the 19th century, was actually closed for Europeans. And even if you kind of managed to get in, you had to face a lot of challenges. You see, there were like local bandits who would attack and like rob and probably kill or whatever, just it was not sunshine and rainbows, if you understand me. And also, I mean, if you sneak in, considering the environment there, it is quite harsh. So you would have to have some kind of physical strength and agility, which is something that Ms. Blavatsky could not boast with. Maybe if she was accompanied by such a grand person as Morya or the teacher, she would have some special treatment. Unheard of, but let's assume and go on with the legend. There were experts saying that Blavatsky had good knowledge of Mahayana Buddhism that one could get only in Tibetan monasteries, which makes things more confusing. But could she have studied it outside Tibet somehow, considering the previous mention and that she was not really physically there? Most of the historians are leaning towards her not actually being there in Tibet during that time. Anyways, what is important here, throughout her further life, she would be constantly contacted by the Mahatmas, giving different directions and important messages to her. And this would happen in a very strange and mystical way. So she would receive these letters that would simply materialize in front of her. So they were not delivered by post or any other way, okay? So this is another topic. We will get to that. It's really interesting. It's very mystical. But yeah, she would always constantly be connected to the teachers. For the Miss Blavatsky lands in the United States of America. This is the place where she would meet this person who would accompany her until the last breath. Some people say that there was more than just a friendship. There was more intimacy, if you can say like that, but she would always deny that, saying that it was simply a strong friendship between them. Who is this mysterious man that she met and how it all changed her life and how she ended up founding a theosophical organization that changed the minds of a lot of people in the world, and a lot of people are still practicing theosophy? Well, we will get to that in part 2, and believe me, the story goes even crazier. There will be also stories about a lot of people who tried to claim she is a fraud. But was she? Well, just press your likes, write comments about how you like this story and how is it developing. And also, of course, write down if you have heard about Madame Blavatsky before. So this is a deep dive. It's a long one. And honestly, I'm at this moment caught in between exams and a lot of challenges in my life. So I'm taking things easy. So I hope you don't be so angry about me dividing the story into 2 parts. And please make sure you have subscribed, press the notification bell so you don't miss the second part, because I promise it's gonna be so interesting. Once again, shout out to David Craig, who is my one and single Patreon forever ever with you. And if you want to be my Patreon, here's the link. You can support me with some monies or not. Any kind of support helps and works with the algorithm. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day. Stay curious, stay careful. Love you. Bye.